So Maya, when were you going to tell everybody you are Denise Carter's daughter?
She was worth $2.3 billion, and nobody in that building knew her name. To them, she was just Maya, the quiet woman who emptied the trash cans on the 9th floor and never once complained. But in exactly 11 days, every person who had ever looked past her, snapped at her, or laughed behind her back was going to find out exactly who she really was. And by then, it would be too late to take any of it back. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. It started 3 months earlier, in a corner office on the top floor of Carter Home and Living, one of the largest home goods companies in the country. Denise Carter had built that company from a single furniture store in Southwest Atlanta into an empire with stores in every major city in America. She had done it with nothing but grit, a business degree she paid for herself, and a refusal to ever let anyone underestimate her twice. Everyone who worked for her respected her. Most people who met her feared her a little too. But there was one person Denise Carter could not figure out how to reach, and that was her own daughter. Imani Carter was 29 years old, and she had never wanted for anything in her life. Private school, a closet full of designer everything, a black card with no limit. And yet, despite all of it, Imani had grown into a woman with a good heart. She just hadn't been tested yet. That was what worried her mother most. Denise had clawed her way up from nothing, and she knew something Imani didn't. Money doesn't teach you who people really are. Struggle does. And if Imani was ever going to run this company, she needed to understand the people who worked in it, not as a boss looking down from a glass office, but as one of them. So one evening, over dinner, Denise set down her fork and looked her daughter dead in the eye. "I want you to work at the company," she said. Imani smiled. "I already do, Mama. I'm on the board." Denise shook her head slowly. "Not like that. I want you to work there as a nobody." Imani laughed, thinking it was a joke, until she saw her mother wasn't laughing back. "What do you mean, a nobody?" "I mean no last name, no office, no title. You'll clean bathrooms and empty trash cans on the corporate floors for 3 months. And nobody, not HR, not security, not one single soul, will know you're my daughter." Imani sat back in her chair, stunned. "Mama, that's insane." Denise leaned forward. "Is it? Because right now you think you're ready to inherit an empire built by people who scrubbed floors to get where they are, and you've never scrubbed a single one yourself. If you can't do this, then maybe you're not ready for what comes after it." The room went quiet. Imani could have refused. She had every right to. But something about the challenge lit a fire under her that she didn't expect. "Fine," she said. "I'll do it." Her mother smiled for the first time all evening. "Good. Because starting Monday, your name is Maya Jackson, and nobody, not one person, can know the truth." 3 weeks later, Imani Carter did not exist. Her hair, usually styled and set, was pulled back into a simple bun. Her nails, always freshly done, were bare. Gone were the tailored blazers and the 4-inch heels. In their place was a plain gray polo shirt with the Carter Home and Living logo stitched over the pocket, comfortable sneakers, and a laminated badge that read Maya J. Facilities. She drove a borrowed Honda with a cracked side mirror instead of her Range Rover, and every morning she parked 3 blocks away and walked the rest, just in case anyone recognized the car. Her first morning on the job, she stood in the break room with a mop bucket, watching employees pour in through the front doors with coffee cups and rolling laptop bags, not one of them glancing her way. She realized, standing there, that she had walked past cleaning staff her entire life without ever really seeing them. Now she understood what that felt like from the other side. It stung more than she expected. The days that followed were harder than anything Imani had ever done. She emptied trash cans that reeked of old coffee and worse. She scrubbed toilets in bathrooms that executives, people who made more in a year than most families made in a decade, somehow could not be bothered to flush properly. She mopped floors people tracked mud across, 5 minutes later, without so much as an apology. Some employees didn't acknowledge her at all, walking past like she was part of the furniture. Others were worse. They barked orders. They complained if a trash can wasn't emptied fast enough, as if she had nothing else to do all day but stand ready for their convenience. And then there was Courtney Pierce. Courtney worked in marketing, and she carried herself like she already ran the place. She was sharp, ambitious, and beautiful in a way she made sure everyone noticed, and she had absolutely no patience for anyone she considered beneath her. The first time she saw Maya cleaning the break room counter, she didn't even say, "Excuse me." She just reached right past her, bumping her arm hard enough to nearly spill the cleaning bucket. "Watch it," Courtney muttered, not even looking up from her phone. Maya bit back every word she wanted to say and simply nodded. "Sorry about that." It became a pattern. Courtney would leave her lunch dishes in the sink for Maya to wash. She'd toss a crumpled napkin on the floor 2 feet from the trash can, rather than walk it over. Once, she looked directly at Maya and said, "Can you make sure this floor is actually clean this time?" Like it was Maya's fault the coffee machine had leaked that morning. Maya never argued. She never even raised her voice. She simply did her job, kept her head up, and reminded herself every single night why she was there. But she was watching. She was always watching. Not because she wanted revenge, because she wanted the truth. Weeks passed, and the loneliness of the disguise started to wear on her more than the physical labor ever could. She had no one to talk to, no one who saw her as anything more than the woman with the mop. Until one Thursday afternoon, sitting alone on an overturned crate in the loading dock, because she hadn't had time to eat lunch again, a voice broke through her exhaustion. "You know, they do actually give you a lunch break here. Whether you take it or not is apparently up to you." She looked up and found a man standing there, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a Carter Home and Living work vest with a name tag that read Malik, warehouse supervisor. He had an easy smile and kind eyes, the kind of face that made you feel like you'd known him longer than you had. "I didn't realize anyone noticed," Maya said. Malik shrugged. Hard not to notice somebody working themselves into the ground and never eating. He held out a foil-wrapped plate. "My grandmother packed me twice as much as I could ever finish. Figured somebody around here could use it." Maya hesitated, then took it. "Thank you." He sat down on the crate next to hers, not across from her, right beside her, like they were equals, because to him, they were. "I'm Malik, by the way." "Maya," she said. "Nice to meet you, Maya." That single act, a plate of food and a seat beside her instead of above her, meant more to Imani than any gift she had ever received in her old life. From that day forward, Malik made a habit of checking on her. He'd ask how her morning was going. He'd save her a seat at the picnic table outside during lunch. He never asked her about her past, never pried into why a woman who spoke like she'd read every book in the library was pushing a mop cart. He just treated her like she mattered, exactly as she was. Over the following weeks, Imani found herself looking forward to those lunch breaks more than anything else in her old life had ever made her look forward to a day. Malik was funny in a dry, understated way. He worked hard, harder than almost anyone in that building, and yet he never once acted like he was better than anybody, and he never once acted like he was less than anybody either. One afternoon, she watched him help an older janitor carry a stack of heavy boxes up 3 flights of stairs because the freight elevator was down, not because anyone asked him to, but because it needed doing. she began to realize that the kindness she'd seen from him wasn't performance. It was simply who he was. There were other moments, smaller ones, that Imani started collecting like little pieces of proof that the world she had grown up in and the world she was living in now were not the same planet at all. There was the morning she watched an executive assistant named Renee quietly slip a $20 bill into the tip jar the overnight crew kept hidden behind the coffee machine, never mentioning it to a soul, never looking for credit. There was the afternoon a delivery driver held the loading dock door open for her for a full minute, apologizing for making her wait, when in her old life people held doors for her because of who her mother was, not because it was simply the decent thing to do. And there was the day she nearly broke her cover completely, 3 weeks in, when a visiting board member from New York walked through the 9th floor for a routine site visit. Imani froze, mid-mop stroke, heart hammering, sure that the man, someone who had sat across from her at a dozen shareholder dinners, would recognize her instantly. He walked within 4 feet of her, glanced at her uniform, and looked straight through her like she was part of the wall. It should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like a quiet kind of grief. The realization that a woman in a cleaning uniform simply did not register as a person worth seeing to men like that, no matter how many times they had shaken her hand at galas. She started keeping a small notebook in her back pocket. Nothing dramatic, just a few lines scribbled during breaks. Renee and the tip jar. The driver who apologized for making me wait 30 seconds. The board member who looked right through me. Malik, who somehow makes a 10-hour shift feel shorter than a lunch break. She never intended to show it to anyone, but late at night, reading back over those scattered lines, she began to understand something her mother had been trying to teach her for years, without ever quite landing it. Character wasn't something you could see on a resume or in a boardroom. It only showed up in the cracks, in the moments people assumed didn't matter. Malik, for his part, had no idea any of that was happening in her head. To him, Maya was simply the woman who had somehow become the best part of his workday without him fully noticing when it happened. He found himself timing his lunch break around hers. He found himself saving the corner seat at the picnic table, the one with actual shade, without even thinking about it anymore. His sister, 16 and sharp as anything, noticed the change in him before he did. "You've been smiling at your phone a lot," she teased one evening over dinner. Malik rolled his eyes. "It's just work stuff." His sister raised an eyebrow. "Work stuff doesn't make you smile like that." Odessa, stirring a pot on the stove with her back to both of them, said nothing, but the corner of her mouth curved up just slightly, the way it did when she already knew something the rest of the family hadn't figured out yet. One evening, long after most of the building had emptied out, Imani was waiting at the bus stop because her borrowed car had finally given out on her that morning, and she hadn't had time to deal with it. Rain had started to fall, and she hadn't brought an umbrella. A car pulled up beside the curb, and the window rolled down. "Get in before you catch a cold," Malik called out. She climbed in, soaked and a little embarrassed. "You didn't have to do this." He smiled, pulling back onto the road. "I know." Somewhere in that short drive, sitting in his beat-up but well-kept truck, listening to him talk about his little sister and the grandmother who had raised them both after their parents passed, Imani understood that she was in serious trouble because she was falling for a man who had no idea who she really was, and the longer this went on, the harder the truth was going to be to tell. He dropped her a few blocks from the address she gave him, an address that was not her real one, and before she got out, he said something that stuck with her the rest of the night. "You work harder than anybody in that building, and you never once complain about it. Somebody ought to notice that. I notice it." Then he drove off, and Imani stood there in the rain for a long moment, not caring that she was getting wet all over again. A few days after the rainy night ride home, Something almost went wrong in a way that could have ended everything early. Imani had left her real phone, the one registered under her actual name, tucked in the pocket of her work jacket, instead of locked in her car, and during a hectic afternoon restocking supplies, it slipped out onto the break room floor. Courtney, of all people, was the one who found it. She picked it up, glanced at the lock screen out of pure nosiness, and saw a notification banner flash across the top, a calendar reminder that read, "Board meeting prep, Imani C." Her brow furrowed. She looked around, then back at the screen, then set the phone down on the counter exactly where she'd found it, deciding, for reasons even she couldn't fully explain yet, to say nothing. Not out of kindness, out of calculation. She wanted to watch a little longer before she decided what a piece of information like that might be worth. Imani found the phone 20 minutes later, exactly where she'd left it, and breathed a sigh of relief that lasted only until she noticed Courtney watching her from across the room with an expression she couldn't quite place. It unsettled her enough that she barely slept that night, replaying every interaction, wondering how much Courtney had actually seen. She decided, for the moment, to say nothing and hope it had gone unnoticed. It hadn't. Meanwhile, Courtney Pierce had begun to notice something too, and it bothered her more than she wanted to admit. She'd seen Malik and Maya laughing together at the picnic table more than once, and something about it needled at her. Not because she wanted Malik, not exactly, but because Maya, a woman who cleaned toilets for a living, was getting attention that Courtney, with her expensive highlights and her corner cubicle, felt she deserved instead. She started finding little ways to remind Maya of her place. Loud comments in the break room about how some people were lucky Carter Home and Living even hired unskilled labor. Snide remarks disguised as jokes when Malik was within earshot. Maya never responded to any of it. She simply kept her head down, and that quiet dignity somehow made Courtney even angrier. Back at the top of the building neither of them could see, Denise Carter had eyes and ears everywhere, and every week she received a quiet report on how her daughter was being treated, and by whom. She read about Courtney's behavior with a tightening jaw. She read about Malik's kindness with something closer to relief. And one evening, she called her daughter to the executive floor using a private after-hours entrance, just to check in. Sitting in her mother's office, out of uniform for the first time in weeks, Imani finally exhaled. "It's harder than I thought it would be," she admitted. Denise nodded slowly. "It's supposed to be. Have you learned anything?" Imani thought about the tired eyes of the overnight cleaning crew, about the coworkers who never said thank you, about Malik's plate of food on a day she hadn't eaten. "I've learned people show you who they are the second they think it doesn't matter." Denise smiled, the kind of smile that held 30 years of hard-won wisdom in it. "That's the only lesson that's ever mattered in business, baby. Everything else you can hire consultants for." Just as their conversation ended, and Imani slipped back toward the service elevator to avoid being seen, Courtney Pierce, who had come back to the office to retrieve a forgotten laptop charger, rounded the corner at exactly the wrong moment. She froze. Through the crack of the office door, she saw Denise Carter, the Denise Carter, pull the cleaning woman from the 9th floor into a warm hug. And then she heard 4 words that changed everything. "That's my girl, baby." Courtney's mouth fell open. She stood there, completely still, watching Maya, the same Maya she had bumped into, snapped at, and looked down on for weeks, wipe tears from her eyes as she hugged the most powerful woman in the entire company. It took every ounce of self-control Courtney had not to gasp out loud. She backed away slowly and didn't breathe again until she reached the elevator, and by the time the doors closed, her shock had already begun curdling into something else entirely: opportunity. The next morning, Courtney arrived at the office wearing a smile so sweet It looked almost painful. She found Maya restocking paper towels in the break room and practically sang her greeting. "Maya, hey, I brought you a coffee. I remembered you liked oat milk." Imani blinked, confused, because she had never once mentioned her coffee order to Courtney or to anyone at that company. Still, she accepted it politely, watching the woman who had ignored her for weeks suddenly act like her closest friend. By lunchtime, half the building had noticed the dramatic shift in Courtney's behavior, though nobody understood why. Imani understood exactly why, and it made her stomach turn. Word began to spread in that subtle, dangerous way rumors do in office buildings, not through any one dramatic announcement, but through a hallway comment here, a knowing look there. By the following week, Courtney had let it slip to 2 different co-workers, off the record of course, that she happened to know Maya wasn't exactly who she appeared to be, and that people might want to be a little more careful about how they treated her. She never said the full truth outright. She didn't need to. She just wanted enough uncertainty in the air to make people nervous, and enough credit for herself for having figured it out first. Malik noticed the change in how people treated Maya before Maya herself fully registered it. Employees who once ignored her were suddenly holding doors for her. Someone left an unprompted thank you card on her cart. It confused him at first, and then it worried him, because he could tell something was shifting beneath the surface, something Maya wasn't telling him. One evening, as they sat together during her last break of the day, he finally asked her directly, "Is there something going on I should know about?" Imani felt her chest tighten. She wanted so badly to tell him everything, the truth about who she was, why she was there, what her real name was, but her mother's warning echoed in her mind. If word got out even one day before the 3 months were up, the entire purpose of the experiment, and possibly her mother's trust in her, would be gone. "Not yet," she said quietly. Malik studied her face for a long moment, then simply nodded. "Okay, whenever you're ready." That was all he said. No pressure, no demands, and somehow that made her fall for him even harder. But not everyone was going to be as patient or as kind. Courtney had grown tired of quietly hinting. She wanted credit, publicly, and she wanted Maya, whoever she actually was, to know that Courtney had figured it out before anybody handed her anything. So on a Friday afternoon, in a crowded break room, in front of nearly a dozen co-workers, Courtney set her coffee down with a little too much force and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "So, Maya, when were you going to tell everybody you're Denise Carter's daughter?" The room went dead silent. Every head turned. Imani felt her whole body go cold. Malik, who had just walked in to grab a water bottle, stopped in the doorway, his expression shifting from confusion to something like betrayal in the span of 2 seconds. "Wait, what?" someone whispered. "Is that true?" another voice asked. Imani's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at Malik, and for the first time since they'd met, he wasn't smiling. She didn't chase him when he walked out. She couldn't. Her legs felt like they didn't belong to her anymore. Courtney, meanwhile, stood there with a satisfied little smirk, arms crossed, clearly pleased with the chaos she had just detonated in the middle of a Friday afternoon. That night, Imani sat alone in her apartment, the real one, the penthouse she hadn't set foot in weeks, because it felt too disconnected from the life she'd been living, and she cried harder than she had in years. Not because her secret was out. She'd always known that day would come eventually. She cried because of the look on Malik's face, because in that one moment, he must have felt like everything between them, every lunch, every ride home, every quiet kindness, had been some kind of lie. She barely slept. By morning, she knew there was only one thing left to do. She couldn't hide anymore, and honestly, she didn't want to. She drove to the warehouse in her own car for the first time, wearing her own clothes, and she found Malik loading a delivery truck, his jaw tight, refusing to look up when she approached. "Malik, please, just give me 5 minutes." He kept working. "You lied to me." "I never lied about who I am when I was with you," she said, her voice cracking. "I lied about my last name. That's it. Everything else, every conversation, every laugh, that plate of food you gave me when I hadn't eaten in 2 days, none of that was a lie. That was the most real I've felt in years." He finally stopped and turned to face her. "So what? This was some kind of experiment for you? Did you get a good laugh watching the warehouse guy fall for the boss's daughter?" Her eyes filled with tears. "It was never about you being a joke to me, Malik. It was about me finally understanding what it feels like to be seen for who you actually are, and not what you're worth on paper. And you, out of every single person in that entire building, you were the only one who ever gave me that." He was quiet for a long moment, his anger visibly wrestling with something softer underneath it. "Why didn't you just tell me?" "Because I was terrified," she admitted. "Terrified that the second you knew, you'd start treating me differently, the way everybody else suddenly is now. Or worse, that you'd think I only kept it from you because I thought I was better than you. And Malik, that could not be further from the truth. I have never in my life felt as good about myself as I did sitting on that crate, eating half your grandmother's cooking, feeling like just a regular person you actually wanted to sit next to." He looked at her for a long time, and something in his expression finally began to soften. "You should have told me," he said quietly. "You're right," she said. "I should have. I'm sorry." The silence between them stretched, heavy but no longer hostile. Finally, he exhaled. "My grandmother's gonna want to know if the woman I told her about is actually real, or if I made her up in my head." Imani let out a wet, surprised laugh. "Does that mean I still get invited to dinner?" A small smile finally broke through on his face. "Depends. You gonna keep any more billion-dollar secrets from me?" "No more secrets," she promised. He nodded slowly, and though the tension hadn't fully disappeared, something had cracked open between them again. Something honest. Word of the confrontation and of Maya's true identity had by now completely overtaken the building. Employees whispered in every hallway. Some were embarrassed, remembering every rude comment they'd ever tossed her way without a second thought. Others were simply stunned. Denise Carter, watching the chaos unfold through updates from her assistant, decided it was finally time. She would not let her daughter's 3 months end in confusion and rumor. She would end it the way it needed to end, with the truth, spoken plainly, in front of everyone who needed to hear it. An emergency company-wide meeting was called for the following Monday morning. Nobody knew exactly what to expect, though by then, most people had pieced together enough of the story to guess. The auditorium filled quickly, nervous energy humming through the crowd. Courtney sat near the front, arms crossed, doing her best to look unbothered, though anyone paying attention could see her leg bouncing beneath her seat. Malik stood near the back, arms folded, watching the stage with quiet intensity. And Imani, no longer in a gray polo shirt, but in a simple, elegant navy dress, stood just off stage, waiting for her mother's signal. Denise Carter walked out to the podium and let the room settle into silence before she spoke. 32 years ago, she began. I started this company with $4,000 and a folding table in a strip mall. Everything you see now, every store, every employee, every dollar this company has ever made, was built because I understood one simple truth. How you treat people when you have nothing to gain from them tells the whole world exactly who you are. The room listened closely. 3 months ago, I asked someone very close to me to walk into this building with no name, no title, and no privilege, and to simply exist here the way most working people exist every single day, unnoticed, underestimated, and often, unfortunately, mistreated. A ripple of unease moved through the crowd. I wanted to see who this company really was when it thought nobody important was watching. She paused, letting the weight of that land. That person is my daughter, Imani Carter, and for the past 3 months, you all knew her as Maya. Gasps rippled through the auditorium. Several people covered their mouths. Courtney's face went pale. Imani stepped out from the side of the stage, and the entire room turned to look at her. Dozens of faces cycling rapidly through shock, embarrassment, and disbelief. Denise continued, her voice steady. During those 3 months, my daughter experienced kindness from people who had absolutely nothing to gain by offering it. And she experienced cruelty from people who assumed her position in life meant she didn't deserve basic respect. Several employees in the crowd visibly shrank in their seats, clearly recalling their own behavior. And I want to be very clear about something, Denise said, scanning the room slowly. This was never a test of my daughter. It was a test of this company, and by extension, a test of every single one of you. She let that settle before continuing. Effective today, there will be changes. Employees who demonstrated integrity, humility, and basic human decency during this period will be recognized and rewarded. She then read off a short list of names, quiet, hard-working people who had never once been thanked publicly for anything. A woman from the overnight cleaning crew who had worked there for 11 years, a young receptionist who always greeted everyone with genuine warmth, and, to the surprise of absolutely no one who had spent any time around him, Malik, whose consistent decency had apparently been noted long before this meeting was ever called. Each name drew warm applause, and several of the honorees wiped away tears. Then Denise's tone shifted, growing more serious. Unfortunately, not everyone in this building represented our values, the way I would hope. She did not call Courtney's name directly, choosing instead to speak in careful, deliberate generalities about the importance of treating every single person, regardless of title or perceived status, with basic dignity, and about how gossip and public humiliation, regardless of the target, would not be tolerated inside this company going forward. She didn't need to say Courtney's name. Everyone in that room already knew exactly who she meant, and Courtney sat frozen in her seat, cheeks burning, as whispers and sideways glances swept the room around her. After the meeting, Imani found Courtney alone by the elevators, visibly shaken, waiting to disappear before anyone could corner her. Part of Imani wanted to walk right past her. Instead, she stopped. "I'm not going to pretend what you did didn't hurt," Imani said quietly. "But I also understand what it's like to feel like you have to fight for a seat at the table." Courtney looked up, clearly bracing for something harsher. "That doesn't make it okay," Imani continued, "but it does make it human. Just think about who you want to be when you think nobody important is watching. Because eventually, everybody's watching." Courtney's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Imani nodded once and walked away, choosing peace over the satisfaction of holding a grudge. Word of what had happened traveled well beyond the walls of Carter Home and Living. A local news outlet picked up the story after an employee posted a shaky cell phone video of the meeting online, and within days, it had been shared thousands of times, with the caption reading, "Billionaire's daughter worked as a janitor for 3 months, and this is what she found." Strangers in the comments argued about whether it was a genuine act of humility or a clever piece of corporate branding. But inside the building itself, none of that noise mattered nearly as much as the small, quiet changes that started happening in the hallways. Employees who had never once made eye contact with the overnight cleaning crew started saying good morning. Someone anonymously organized a fund to help cover medical expenses for a member of the janitorial staff whose husband had gotten sick. and it filled up within 2 days. It was as if the entire building had collectively exhaled and remembered something it had forgotten a long time ago, that everyone wearing a badge in that building, no matter what their badge said, was a full and complete human being with a life outside those walls. Courtney did not get fired, not officially, though after the meeting she requested a transfer to a different division, one where fewer people knew her face and fewer people whispered when she walked into a room. Imani could have blocked the transfer. Instead, she approved it personally, along with a private note that read simply, "Everyone deserves a chance to become someone different than who they were last year. I hope you take it." Months later, a mutual coworker mentioned that Courtney had started volunteering on weekends at a shelter downtown, something she never talked about at work and never posted online. Imani never brought it up to her directly. Some kinds of growth, she'd come to believe, didn't need an audience to be real. In the weeks that followed, Malik's grandmother, a warm, sharp-tongued woman named Odessa, who had raised him and his sister single-handedly after tragedy, took both of their parents far too young, finally got to meet Imani properly over Sunday dinner. She looked her up and down at the front door, studied her for a long moment, and then simply said, "Well, come on in then. Don't just stand there letting the cold in." Over a table full of food that put every five-star restaurant Imani had ever eaten at to shame, Odessa asked her question after question, not about money, not about the company, but about her character, her faith, how she treated people, what she wanted out of life. By the time dessert was served, Odessa leaned over to her grandson and said, loud enough for everyone at the table to hear, "This one's got good sense. Don't mess it up." Imani and Malik spent the following months slowly, carefully building something real, something that had already survived its hardest test before it had even officially begun. They argued sometimes, they laughed constantly, and every single evening, Malik still asked her the same question he'd asked back when he thought she was just Maya from facilities. "How was your day?" Not how was the company doing, not how were the numbers. How was her day? And every time he asked it, she remembered exactly why she'd fallen for him in the first place. Denise watched all of it unfold from a distance she had carefully maintained the entire 3 months, and later, when Imani asked her how she'd managed to stay so hands-off through all of it, her mother admitted it had nearly killed her. "There were nights I wanted to march down there myself and shut the whole thing down," Denise confessed over coffee one Sunday morning, "especially after I heard how that Pierce girl was treating you. But I knew if I stepped in even once, you'd never really know if you could survive it on your own. And worse, you'd never really know who those people were when they thought there were no consequences coming." Imani reached across the table and squeezed her mother's hand. "I used to think you sent me down there to toughen me up." Denise shook her head slowly. "I sent you down there to wake you up. There's a difference. Toughness just means you stop feeling things. I never wanted that for you. I wanted you to feel everything, and still choose kindness anyway. That's harder, and it's worth more." A year later, Carter Home and Living looked like a different company entirely. Denise had implemented new policies company-wide, based directly on what her daughter had witnessed during those 3 months. Better protections for hourly employees, a formal recognition program for behind-the-scenes staff who so often went unseen, and a company culture built explicitly around the idea that respect was not optional and was not reserved only for people with impressive titles. Imani, no longer in disguise, now sat on the executive floor as chief operating officer, preparing to eventually take over the entire company. But she never once forgot the woman named Maya, and she made absolutely certain that no employee at Carter Home and Living ever again felt as invisible as she had felt during those 3 months. On a warm spring evening, in the same garden behind the Carter family estate where Imani had played as a little girl, family and friends gathered for a wedding. Odessa sat in the front row, dabbing at her eyes before the ceremony had even started. Denise stood near the aisle, radiant with pride, watching her daughter, dressed simply and beautifully, without a single diamond or designer label in sight, walk toward a man in a plain gray suit who was looking at her like she was the only person in the entire world. When the officiant asked if anyone had anything they wanted to say before the vows, Malik cleared his throat and spoke without any notes prepared. "I fell in love with a woman named Maya, who ate her lunch on an overturned milk crate and never once complained about a hard day's work. Turns out her name was actually Imani, and turns out she was worth more money than I'll ever be able to picture in my head, but none of that ever mattered to me, because the woman I fell in love with was never about the money at all. She was about a plate of food, a rainy night, and somebody finally being seen. There wasn't a dry eye left in that garden." Later that night, after the last of the guests had gone home and the string lights in the garden had been switched off one strand at a time, Imani sat on the back steps of the estate, still in her wedding dress, shoes kicked off in the grass beside her, while Malik loosened his tie and sat down next to her, the same easy way he always had. Not above her, not below her, just beside her. "Do you ever think about how none of this happens if your car doesn't break down that day?" she asked. He laughed softly. "I think about how none of this happens if I don't decide to bring an extra plate that morning. My grandmother still takes full credit for that, by the way. She says the whole marriage is basically her doing." Imani smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "Maybe it is." He wrapped his arm around her, and for a long moment neither of them said anything at all, content just to sit there in the quiet, two people who had found each other in the most ordinary, unglamorous way possible, over a shared lunch on a loading dock, and who both understood, better than almost anyone else they knew, that the most important moments in life rarely announce themselves in advance. Sometimes they just sit down next to you on an overturned crate and ask if you've eaten yet. If there is one thing this story reminds us of, it's simple. The way you treat someone when you believe they have nothing to offer you says everything about who you really are. Money can disappear. Titles can change overnight. But character, real character, shows up in the smallest moments, the ones you think nobody important is ever watching. Kindness costs nothing, and yet it is worth absolutely everything. If this story touched your heart even a little bit, let us know in the comments what you would have done if you were in Malik's shoes. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe, because we have another story coming that just might move you even more than this one did.